Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining tonight's virtual Political Page-Turners event hosted by the Institute of Politics and Public Service at the McCourt School of Public Policy, known to many of you as GU Politics. My name is Ashley Pollard, and I am a 2020 graduate of the McCourt School of Public Policy, where I received my Master of Public Policy. Throughout my time at Georgetown, I have had the opportunity to participate in various GU Politics events, both in person and virtual, like fellow happy hours and speaker events. This spring, I took a course with Ted Johnson titled 2020 Path to the Presidency, where we dove into political theory and primary campaign strategy. I'm personally looking forward to connecting topics explored in Professor Johnson's class with our discussions tonight. I am pleased to introduce our guest tonight, Symone Sanders, Senior Advisor to Joe Biden's presidential campaign and author of No, You Shut Up, Speaking Truth to Power and Reclaiming America. As a fellow woman of color, I am encouraged by Symone's political leadership, passion for social change, and representation in a space that has historically excluded women of color. Symone is a seasoned political strategist who, at 25, became the youngest presidential press secretary on record while working on U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders' 2016 presidential campaign, and was named to Rolling Stone magazine's list of 16 young Americans shaping the 2016 election. Symone unapologetically fights for juvenile justice reform and paves pathways for millennials like myself to fight for our passions. We are thrilled to have Symone with us tonight to discuss her new book, career path, and experience on the 2020 campaign trail. During tonight's event, please share your thoughts on social media using the hashtag #PoliticalPageTurners and by tagging GU Politics at GU Politics. Tonight's Political Page-Turners event will be moderated by GU Politics Executive Director, Mo Olathe, who is going to kick us off.
Ashley, thanks so much for the introduction, and congratulations on your graduation from the McCourt School. Just what, like 48 hours ago? Welcome to the GU alumni community. And I want to welcome everyone who's tuning in. Everyone who's tuning in via social media platforms on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and to the members of the Georgetown community who are participating via Zoom. I'm looking forward to getting to your questions as quickly as possible. Tonight's going to be an interesting conversation. It'll be a fun conversation with probably one of the more interesting speakers we've had here. One piece of housekeeping before we get started. For those of you in the Georgetown community who are participating via Zoom, you'll get a chance to ask your questions. If you look at the bottom of the window, you'll see the Q&A button. Click on that, and you can start to type in your questions, and you can start to type them in now. As we transition to the student Q&A portion, someone from the team will let you know when you are up. So keep an eye on the chat. That's where they'll tell you. And then once they tell you you're up, be, as we say in the business, be camera ready, because we're going to make you famous. So with that, let's get started. I am very pleased to welcome back to GU Politics, Symone Sanders. Symone, by my count, I think this is your third time addressing us. The first time on campus a couple of years ago, and then most recently, a couple of days before the Iowa caucus with a number of the students that we brought out to Iowa for a really fascinating briefing on what you guys were up to. So welcome back.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here. You know, I have yet to have a pleasure to be a fellow at GU Politics. Maybe I will get to stamp GU Politics on my card post this election, but I will have to tell you, my Harvard peeps are calling me up like, are you with the Georgetown folks now? And I'm like, we're all one big happy family.
It's all.
So I'm always happy to be here.
Well, I'm glad you took some time out. I know these are busy days for you.
Just a little bit, just slightly.
Just a little bit, but we'll get to that shortly. All right, you wrote a book. How the hell you wrote a book in the middle of a presidential campaign and are out there, which it's released tomorrow. So we're one of the first big previews here tonight. So tell us a little bit about what motivated you to write the book. And I'm particularly interested in the title, Shut Up. Because honestly, I can't imagine anyone telling you to shut up. I feel like I would hide under my desk if I ever tried to say that to you.
Well, Mo, you are wise, okay? But there are some people out there not so wise. So I'm really happy to be here with the GU Politics family. I will tell you, I never thought of myself as a writer. I'm represented by United Talent. Those are my agents when I was a commentator on CNN. And someone from the book department came to me and they're like, people want to know if you want to do a book. And I'm like, I have no plans to do a book. I don't know what I would write about. But we had a couple conversations and I ended up speaking with HarperCollins and a woman named Sarah Hoggins, who's my amazing editor from HarperCollins. She is like, I think you need to write this book. And I'm like, Sarah, I don't know. This was, we were having these conversations mid-2018. So by the end of the year, we settled on, we were doing this book. We had a very ambitious timeline. I needed a draft within like 4 months. They wanted a draft by spring 2019. And at the end of 2018, November 2018, I didn't think I was going on the campaign trail. Obviously, that changed. In April, I decided to go and work for Vice President Biden's presidential campaign. So most of my book was actually done by the time I got on the campaign trail. But in the book, I tell a couple stories about why I joined the campaign, my first meeting with Vice President Biden, my first disastrous TV interview. I'm sure many people saw. But the title of the book is No You Shut Up, Speaking Truth to Power and Reclaiming America. And the title comes from an interview I did on CNN. It was post Charlottesville. So we were having a conversation on CNN's New Day. And this was back when Chris Cuomo was on the morning show, Mo. So this is a while back. Mm-hmm. Now everyone knows Chris has a 9 p.m. show. This was in the morning around 7:30-ish. And it was myself, former Attorney General of Virginia, now currently with the Trump administration, Ken Cuccinelli, and Chris Cuomo. We were having a conversation. Ken Cuccinelli was saying some things that was not correct. And I'm like, that's not true. And Chris Cuomo said, well, explain what you mean, Ken. And he started explaining, and he was talking about Charlottesville and saying that, it really just started because some people wanted a permit and other folks are trying to make this something that it's not. This is after Heather Heyer has already been killed. This is after the images of neo-Nazis and white supremacists marching on the streets of Charlottesville, Virginia. And I jump in because he's talking about a permit, and I'm like, and now someone's dead. And Ken Cuccinelli says, Symone, will you just shut up and let me speak? And then he goes, how do you get them to stop talking? They keep jumping in. Who is them and who is they? I never forgot being told to shut up before people had their Cocoa Puffs in the morning. I was embarrassed. I was incensed because I knew if I was, 35 and, my name was Tommy, I probably would have been told to shut up on national television by anyone, let alone a former Attorney General of Virginia. And so I always carried that with me. And I think that a lot of times so many people out there have been given the proverbial shut up. And that is what I talk about in the book. So I kick it off in the introduction talking about so many of us have been given the proverbial shut up. And now is the time where we actually need to speak up and not shut up. So I guess thank you, Ken Cuccinelli, because without him, I wouldn't have had a book title.
Who would have ever thought you would say Ken Cuccinelli was your inspiration?
Who knew?
Who knew? I was doing the math this morning, and I should know better than to ever do the math. When I did my first presidential campaign, you were, I think, in grade school.
Probably.
And I think back to how I was when I was in my early to mid 20s getting started. And I was young and I was hungry and I wanted to get into the game. But I kind of followed the steps that they say you're supposed to follow. And what I really found, I wish I'd read your book back then, because I think you give a lot of good advice to particularly young people and anybody who really hasn't had the opportunity to have their political voice raised. Mm-hmm. Give them advice on how to have it heard, or at least how to set themselves up. And you do it very thematically. And so I want to touch on a couple of those themes today, and then let you just kind of run with it. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting, and this is later in the book, so I'm going to start later in the book and work my way back, is this notion of get out of line. Yep. Right? And I think you can read that Chapter 5. I think you can read that a couple of different ways, what it means, what get out of line means. Talk about that a little bit and what that meant to you.
Mo, I think I've always been a habitual line jumper, if you will. I'm originally from Omaha, Nebraska, North Omaha to be specific. And Omaha, Nebraska is the second congressional district that gave Obama the blue dot in 2008. But the rest of Nebraska is not necessarily a bastion of Democratic politics. And so I knew for a really long time that I wanted to work in politics. But I realized early on, shortly after I graduated, that I'm not gonna, hit it big in national politics, staying in Omaha, Nebraska. I didn't have the opportunity to participate in any of the standard programs that people get to participate in. I never interned for my congressman or my senator. I wasn't a CBCI boot camp fellow. So I really had no there were no natural avenues for me to really get into DC politics. And so Get Out of Line, that chapter, is really all about taking unconventional ways, like stepping out of line if you need to get to the places where you want to be. And it could be applied to politics. It could be applied to business, education, if you want to do something in your community. But I think especially for young people like me, if you are a young person of color, someone who doesn't come from a lot of means, a woman, you have to be willing you could be the best. You could be the smartest. You could, have the best ideas out of everyone in the pack, but they still might not pick you, whoever the proverbial they is. And if I literally waited my career for somebody to pick me, we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation. I wouldn't have wrote a book, and I wouldn't be super active in this election, to get Donald Trump out of the White House. So, getting out of line, I think, is necessary, especially for young people. It's about taking a risk. So oftentimes, I think in that chapter, I talk about how Dr. King took risks. And I think a lot of times we gloss over how we remember Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but the reality is he was a risk taker. He was an idealist, but he was also a realist. He understood that if he wanted to turn the tide of well-meaning white people in the North to what was happening in the South, in the fight for the right to vote, he had to make sure that they saw what was happening. So Dr. King had Black folks dress up in their Sunday best and go down to the courthouse on a Friday or a Thursday and try to vote, knowing that they would be beaten, that hoses would be sicked on them, dogs would be sicked on them, turned on them. And he instructed folks not to fight back, and had cameras there and the radios, and it was a strategy. But Dr. King had to take a risk. He had to get out of line in order to gain attention for the movement. So I'm all about getting out of line when necessary, ladies and gentlemen. But I think it is absolutely pertinent, especially for young people that want to, do this. It's cool to be a change maker now. Like when President Obama got elected, everybody wanted to be a community organizer. Now everybody wants to be an activist and a change maker. But the reality is, if you really want to create change, if you want to really help move mountains, you have to be willing to do some unconventional things.
When I give career advice to Georgetown students, I always tell them, you got to be willing to put in the hard work, do the grunt work, do the clips, do the, all the things
I've done the clips.
We've all done the clips, right? But at the same time, know what you want and go get it. Mm-hmm. And you talk about that. You talk about sort of knowing what you want and asking for it, even when you don't think it's attainable, to ask for it and to go get it. And I was really struck by the story you tell in the book about your first meeting with Senator Sanders when you were really new in the business.
I was fresh, okay? I had never worked Senator Sanders was my first presidential. At that point, I think I'd worked maybe 14, 15 campaigns, or 14 campaigns, but not a presidential, not a national campaign at all. Nothing.
So talk about what that was like, walking in and kind of getting the call out of the blue from Jeff Weaver saying that they wanted to talk, and you go in and you meet with Senator Sanders. What was that like?
I tell in the book, y'all will have to read the book to catch the lead up, but I somehow find myself on my way to Senator Sanders' office. Luckily, I had a blazer in my car. Young people always keep a blazer in your car, because I was running around on the Hill that day doing other meetings, no blazer. Senator Sanders wants to meet you. I'm like, oh, grab the blazer. So I get in my car, I go over to his office, and I go into his office, and it's just he and I. We're sitting down. I crack a joke about us having the same last name. And then we talk about everything that you can imagine we talked about. And this was the summer of 2015. He asked me about Nebraska. He asked me about the work that I've done. And then we started talking about national politics and his campaign and the news at the time. And then we ended up getting in an argument, basically. If anyone has ever, Senator Sanders does it on interviews now, he'll often say, you have a fundamental misunderstanding. And so he told me I had a fundamental misunderstanding. And I said, well, frankly, sir, I don't think you understand what I'm trying to say. And so he let me engage in a dialogue with him about economic policy and how it's intertwined with other issues. And it's not just, class, it's race and all these other things. And we ended up in a good place. So at the end of our conversation, I felt like we reconciled. It wasn't an argument anymore. We saw each other's perspectives. And the senator told me that he liked me. And I was like, I like you too. And he's like, I think I want you to work here. I was like, I think I want to work here too. And then Senator Sanders asked me something that no one else had asked me before. And at this point, I'd been on this is my 29th interview. And he asked did I have an idea of what I'd like to do? And without hesitation, I said, yes, I would like to be the National Press Secretary. I want to be your on-the-record spokesperson. And I want to have a hand in some of the messaging strategy, just like we discussed here. And I said just like that with a straight face. And he laughed at me just like you're laughing, Mo. And he looked at me and he was like, oh, and I told him I want to do cable television. And he was like, have you ever done cable television before? And I said, no, sir, but I do believe I would be very good at it. And that was a Thursday. I get a call on a Tuesday, and it's Jeff Weaver telling me that I got a job. And not only do I have a job, I'm like, what's my job title, Jeff? And he said, National Press Secretary. So I would say the lesson in that is, everyone, it is not every day, okay, that a sitting United States senator calls you and also happens to be running for president, and you just happen to have a chance to speak candidly with said United States senator and then go work on their campaign. So everybody does not have doesn't have Bernie Sanders, but I think we all have a similar encounter. And the question is, when your opportunity comes, do you have an answer? And how many times, to the young people out there watching, does someone ask you, what do you want for dinner? Okay. And everybody's like, oh, I don't know. I'm unsure. We just, my boyfriend and I, we just asked his son, well, what kind of vegetables would you like for dinner? He was like, I don't know. And I'm like, you do know. What kind of vegetables would you like? He's like, carrots and green beans and French fries. Well, French fries is not a vegetable, so we're not doing that one. But he had an answer. And I think we always have to have an answer. And not only have an answer, but ask for what it is that we want, not what we think somebody's going to give us. Ask for what it is that we deserve. And so many times we ask for the thing right up under the thing that we really want, because we think the thing that we really want is it's just too much, Mo. We can't ask for that. That's improper. We have to ask for let's ask for this down here, and then maybe we can work our way up to there. I want to shoot for the stars, so maybe I can land on the moon. And so it's knowing what you want for dinner. And oftentimes when somebody asks you what you want for dinner, So just tell the people what you want for dinner. You might not get it, but maybe you will. Heck, well, Sean might have got some French fries today. Have we been feeling froggy? Ask for what you want.
One of the themes in the book that strikes me as I listen to you talk is that advice, it doesn't just apply to careers, it applies to making change, right? Mm-hmm. That when you are out there as an advocate, fighting for something that you believe in, right? That sort of shooting for the stars when it comes to making policy change or political change, or as you call chapter 4, becoming a radical revolutionary.
Yes.
Right? That it is about sort of shooting for the stars, because otherwise you don't get there. Exactly.
I mean, look, I say this in the book, change can't wait, but change takes time. And you have to be willing, our campaign manager, General Mallory Dillon, always tells us we can do hard things. You have to be willing to do hard things. Radical revolutionaries, Dr. King is a radical revolutionary. You, Mo, are a radical revolutionary. There was no Institute of Politics at Georgetown, okay? How did the Institute of Politics at Georgetown come about? Some people got together and said, is there a reason why we cannot do this too? And maybe even better than some of the other people that do it in our own way with our own brands. and let's build something from the ground up. I remember when the Institute of Politics started. We have to figure out ways that we can be a radical revolutionary in our everyday spaces and places. Sometimes being a radical revolutionary means speaking up in that very uncomfortable moment, not letting something slide. Sometimes being a radical revolutionary is about speaking somebody else's truth who is not in the room to do that for themselves. Like, there are all ways. I wrote in the book, my radical revolutionary contribution is campaign. Okay, you won't find me at the die-in with my sign dying in. Okay, why? Because that wasn't my radical revolutionary contribution. At one point in time, I needed to be on CNN explaining to America, the world in some instances, why people were on the streets dying in, why it was so important that they're doing X, Y, and Z. Now, it is my job to speak to my colleagues and my boss about why the die-in is important and what it is we can do about it to support these people and their cause. That's my radical revolutionary contribution. But that might not be someone else's mission. So everybody needs to find their piece of the pie, but we all should strive to be radical revolutionaries in our everyday spaces and places, because that is how we create change. So change can't wait, but change does take time, and change comes with a strategy. Sometimes people aren't seeing change because they lack a strategy. There would be no Institute of Politics at Georgetown without a strategy.
Just a reminder to the students that you can start to submit your questions by clicking on the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. We'll be moving to student questions shortly. Symone, and I want to get to those student questions soon. So, Symone, one of the things that you keep coming back to in the book are some really compelling stories about the sometimes implicit, oftentimes explicit biases that you had to contend with, whether it was because you're young, or because you're Black, or because you're a woman, usually because you're a young Black woman.
All of those compounded.
All the things to get all of the things. And so many people that are tuning in deal with these biases themselves, right? Whether it's because they're young and people don't take them seriously, or because of their skin color. For me, and much of my career is because Mo is short for Mohammed, and I had to deal with a lot of challenges with that. So I'm curious. And you tell some stories, some of them pretty harrowing, but the one that really stuck with me was about, here you are at not quite the apex because you're still ascendant, but you had finally made it big. You're national press secretary for a major presidential candidate. You are traveling with the candidate. You are standing next to the candidate, and they still tried to keep you out of the room.
Oh, the state trooper.
The state trooper still tried to keep you out of the room. So I'd love to maybe touch on that story a little bit, but your advice to people on how to overcome those biases.
Wow. So I will, I think I rarely told this story before I put it in the book, because I'm like, what haven't I told that I can put in the book that will help somebody? And, again, folks, get the book. But long story short, we are in some place in northeastern United States of America at a rally in January of 2016. We're outside, we're transitioning to go inside. Senator Sanders went outside to address the overflow crowd. And as we're walking back in, all I hear is a state trooper. Well, I didn't know it was a state trooper at the time, but I thought it was a police officer. And all you hear is, ma'am, move to the side, ma'am, move, screaming. I'm like, oh, I don't know who that is. I hope that lady moves. Ma'am, move to the side, ma'am, move. I was like, they are about to get this, they about to snatch this lady up. And next thing I know, a state trooper has hands on me, attempting to yank me, literally pull me this way. And I am walking with the package, as we call it. They attempt to pull me out of the package. Our trip director, a tall, good friend of mine, Paul Stovall, throws his hand across me and says, excuse me, do we have an issue? This is the National Press Secretary. And the state trooper backs up and says, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't know. And I look at him and I say, because the Black girl couldn't have been with Senator Sanders, right? And I turn around and everyone is just like aghast. Like, people are like, oh my God, what is happening? And I know, they know me. So they were like, what is she about to do? Y'all saw me take that protester off the stage a couple months ago. You don't know.
I was going to get to that.
But I turned around and I said, see, y'all, this is what I'm always talking about. And I look at Paul, and Paul looks at me, and Paul said, well, what are we going to do? I said, we got work to do, Paul. He was like, that's right. And we go on into the building. And nobody else, to this day, no one else has ever said anything to me about that. And I don't think it's because folks thought what the state trooper was doing was okay. I honestly think everyone was shocked. And people might not even remember that encounter, but it is seared in my brain, because it was something that made me feel like it didn't belong. Someone tried to make me feel like I was out of place. A state trooper literally tried to pull me out of the entourage. Donna Brazile once told me in 2016, I called complaining, all these things. And Donna Brazile asked me, do I still have a job? Yes. Are you getting paid? Yes. Okay. Are you about to be fired? Absolutely not. Like, I'm fine. I'm just having a thing. And Donna Brazile says to me, I will never forget, she said, if you can't handle this, perhaps this is not the job for you. And I then quickly ended our conversation because I was upset. I was a young millennial. You don't understand. I'm going through these things. And then I called her back later, a couple days later. And what Donna was saying is that, look, sexism, ageism, racism are things we have to combat every day. We have to stand up to them. We have to call it out. We have to fight for a better America, better workplaces, better institutions. But these things are also not going away tomorrow. So while we're fighting to eradicate them, we also have to figure out how to navigate through them. And if I couldn't handle just a little bit of racism in Northeastern United States as National Press Secretary, how can I handle it as, a commentator on CNN, where regularly people would send me emails calling me like literally a Black supremacist. I don't know what that is, but very, very nasty things people would say in my email on social media. How can you handle it as a senior advisor on a campaign trail? How can you handle it in the next thing that you do? And so it is really important that we don't allow the isms to stop us. Whatever the ism is, we need to address it. We need to navigate through it, and we should not let people sweep it under the rug. But the navigating through it part is really important because, I still had to go inside and do my job. I couldn't be, ugly, boo-hoo-hoo cry about the fact that what I just experienced was like, it was literally profiling. It looked like someone assessed that I did not belong, and they came to pull me out. But I still had to go to work, Mo. Yeah. And oftentimes we still got to go to work because going to work is how we help change things.
Yeah. Amongst the many good pieces of advice you gave, I think one that I wholeheartedly endorse is whatever Donna Brazile says, you do.
Exactly.
I want to make sure we get to the student questions. I want to talk a little bit about, you talk about being sort of this radical revolutionary, fighting for big things, being sort of progressive revolutionaries. You had to have dealt with, and you touch on this a little bit in the book, you had to have had some of your former colleagues and supporters sort of do a double take when they heard you signed up with Vice President Biden instead of with Bernie Sanders this next time. Can you talk a little bit about that thought process and how you see that move, signing on with the vice president, as being consistent with your long trajectory of being a change agent?
Yeah, well, I will say I am really proud of the work that I did on Senator Sanders' campaign in 2015, 2016, and knowing everything that I know now, I would sign up and do it again, and again and again and again. I would do it again. But I stopped working for the Sanders campaign. I left the campaign in June of 2016. Then I went and worked convention. Then I started my own consulting company because nobody would hire me. Then that's how I became a political commentator on CNN. Then I joined up with Guy Cecil, and I was one of his senior advisors as we relaunched and retooled Priorities USA. And I was, teaching a class at USC, and I taught a class at the Institute of Politics at Harvard. And when it came time to decide if I wanted to go back on the campaign trail or not, for a long time, I wasn't sure that I wanted to go. But I did not want to spend this election cycle, sitting on a panel, frankly, pontificating about the work that other people were doing. For me, that wasn't enough because I'm a habitual campaign staffer, and I wanted to do everything that I could to get Donald Trump out of office. And I felt like everything that I could was not sitting on a panel. Nothing wrong with sitting on a panel, okay? I would happily go back to my panel, okay? Another day, I will happily go back.
Yeah, note to all CNN agents that are listening.
But, I wanted to go get in there and do the work. And so, I knew a lot of people actually personally this go around that happened to be running for president because there were a lot of folks. But when I sat down with Vice President Biden, it was like I've known him for years. And what he was saying, the theory of the case that he articulated, that we are in a battle for the soul of the nation, that Charlottesville was not just an inflection point for all these people around America, it was the one for him. And that what we are seeing from the White House, from the administration, Trump's administration, and throughout is a abuse of power. And you have to check an abuse of power. And like me, Vice President Biden said, he was like, I didn't want to spend this election cycle thinking, what if I would have ran for president? And I'm like, me too, except I'm not trying to run for president. I just want to work for somebody. And, I feel like I believed in what he was saying. I thought he was absolutely right. I feel like we got it right. He is the Democratic nominee. But I will say that my values are not tied to a particular person. And I think a lot of folks have their political ideology and what they believe and their political values wrapped up in a particular person. Whether it's, Senator Sanders or Joe Biden or Barack Obama or Kamala Harris or whomever. And I actually don't find that productive, because I think that we have to have something that anchors us. Like, what I believe doesn't change from who I work for. Like, I still believe in equity. I believe in fairness. I believe that we have to fix our juvenile justice system so that it is actually a system that serves young people and that does not further harm them. I believe in equity. I believe we have to do something about the grotesque wealth inequality in this country. I believe that the president has completely mishandled the coronavirus pandemic, and what was once just a public health crisis is now an economic crisis because Donald Trump was complacent, and I still don't know what he was doing in January and February, of 2020. Maybe he will let us know soon. So my political ideology is wrapped up in my own values and the things that I believe. So that is why I can work convention. I can, be a senior advisor for Parties USA. I can work for Senator Sanders. I can work for Joe Biden. I can work for, a progressive trade think tank. So I know some people don't understand. Like, it still doesn't compute for them. And so I would tell, a piece of advice I give in the book is that, you cannot make decisions based on what other people are going to think about you. Because if I lived my life worrying about what other people were going to say, I literally would never make a move. And so at the end of the day, I think I made the right decision. I feel good.
Yeah, as you should. But I want to touch on that last point a little bit, because you can feel good about it yourself, right? But one of the, and I get it, I've been in Democratic politics a long time. I know that one of the favorite storylines is, Democrats in disarray. But there is sort of this storyline that there's still some lingering hesitation by people who are with Senator Sanders or maybe Senator Warren with signing on with the vice president, the former vice president's campaign, that they don't feel like he is pure enough for them. You've been on both sides of that, right? You were with Senator Sanders, now you were with the vice president. What would your message be to those people who are still harboring doubts? Is there a way to win them over? How is the campaign going to actually make sure that the party is fully unified?
Well, I would say three things. One, I would say, look at Senator Sanders. Senator Sanders wholeheartedly endorsed Vice President Biden. It wasn't just a paper endorsement or a tweet. They had a very long and wide-ranging conversation about the issues, where Senator Sanders stood before like a very widely lauded and touted live stream and told people why he is supporting Vice President Biden, why we need to get behind him, why we need to rally together, and how they plan to work together. And I think that's very powerful. And so people who truly believe in what Bernie is saying, if you believe Bernie Sanders is telling you why he's gotten behind Joe Biden. Bernie Sanders believes, like Vice President Biden believes, that it's going to take all of us, if we are going to defeat Donald Trump and build on this bold progressive vision that both Senator Sanders and Vice President Biden have together. Secondly, though, I'll say that Vice President Biden himself has said for a long time that he needs these young people that Senator Sanders brought in. These folks that were maybe a little disconnected from politics, but Senator Sanders or Senator Warren or Kamala Harris inspired them. That we need those folks, that we need that enthusiasm, we need their ideas, and that we cannot do this without them, that our campaign is a campaign for anyone that's been counted out, knocked down. We welcome you. And I think that's really important because leadership starts at the top. And the third thing I'll say is that our engagement to these folks is truly genuine. When we talk about progressive engagement, we have gone literally organization by organization, what I like to call with meticulous surgical precision in our progressive engagement, because I think that's what it takes to truly show folks, not just show and tell, but like we're actively demonstrating to a number of our progressive friends that we are in this for the long haul. We want to know where it is we align and how we can build and expand upon that alignment. When it comes to young people, we are launching, what week is this? Next week, we are launching we're coming out with our branding for our Young Americans program. I'm very excited about it. Not breaking any news here tonight, but just look out for it next week, ladies and gentlemen. But that is the culmination of a project that folks inside our campaign have been working on since last summer, with the input of young people across college campuses and high school students from our Students for Biden program, from some young professional folks, from young elected officials, some who've been with us from the beginning, and some people who are like, look, I care about not only beating Donald Trump, but progress. And what's happening now didn't have to be this way. So let's do everything we can so we can get on the road to what we're calling a Biden recovery. So we won't win them all, Mo, but we do have to try. And that is what we're doing.
So my last question before we go to the students, look, running against an incumbent is hard, right? There's a reason why not many are defeated, at least in the modern era. It's got to be really harder, much harder when you've got to redefine what it means to campaign, because we're all stuck in our homes, and your candidate can't go out there and do rallies, and your canvassers can't go door to door. So I'm wondering how you guys are reimagining campaigning and how you tackle that real challenge while still trying to get the message out.
Yeah, well, you heard Vice President Biden say recently, where was he? He was on Good Morning America with George Stephanopoulos. And he said, George Stephanopoulos asked him this very question. Actually, he framed it as like, is it hurting you that you can't get out there? And Vice President Biden asserted then, as I will assert now, that we reject the notion that the fact that we are in a virtual campaign world right now because everyone is at home due to COVID-19, the coronavirus pandemic, that it's hurting us. Seems like we're doing pretty good if you look at some of these polls, because we're actively engaging. So Vice President Biden and Dr. Biden have been doing virtual travel days, if you will. Tomorrow he's going to Wisconsin. Last week he was in Florida. Dr. Biden was in Michigan, and she was in Pennsylvania. We are prioritizing local media. We're still doing national media. We're doing roundtables. He did a Snapchat interview with Peter Hamby the other day for his Snapchat show, plus it doubled as a piece for Vanity Fair magazine. So we've had to get creative. But we fully believe, actually, that Vice President Biden, one, is breaking through, but two, his message and his campaign is a message and a campaign that people are receptive to, because Joe Biden is talking about a Biden recovery that will benefit folks. Joe Biden is highlighting and elevating the voices of frontline workers, not just talking about what he would do as president right now, if he were president right now, but talking about what he will do when he is elected. And people want to see a forward-looking, forward-thinking vision, and that's what Vice President Biden is giving them. Now, will we like to get out there and campaign out in the world? Absolutely. As Vice President Biden said in that interview, he's chomping at the bit to get out. But he will go when it is safe. We will be informed by the scientists, unlike the people that work at the White House, namely the president.
All right, with that, we'll get to the good questions. First up, we've got a question from Mackenzie Grimm, who incidentally, Symone, was one of the students you met on the GU Politics trip to Iowa. So Mackenzie, you're up. And as a reminder to all the students, I just introduced Mackenzie, but when I call on you, tell us who you are, what school year you are, where you're zooming in from.
Hi, Symone, thanks for being here.
I remember you, Mackenzie. Hello.
Yeah. Hi, it's so nice to see you. It's crazy to see where we've all ended up 3-4 months out. But I'm a rising senior now in the college studying government and linguistics. And you already talked a little bit about the struggles that you face regarding your race and your gender in the political arena. I was wondering if you could speak more to the problem of being tokenized for your identities, whether you've had to face that, or what is your experience with coming to terms with that?
This is a good question, Mackenzie. Thank you. Mackenzie asked about being tokenized. I think when I first got my job on the Sanders campaign, I think a lot of people looked at the headlines and said, oh, Senator Sanders is having some issues with African-American protesters. And so he went and hired an African-American press secretary, and that fixes it. And I don't understand how people thought that, that's just what you do to fix your issue. But so often, many times throughout the campaign and even post 2016, people have assumed that I am somewhere because that I'm a young Black person, and not necessarily assumed that I have a job because I earned it, I worked for it, or I'd be good for this environment. But again, back to good old Donna Brazile and her advice, I'm navigating through it. And so the best way, I think, to combat things like that is to show up every day and be good at your job. And so whatever your job is, show up every day at your internship, ladies and gentlemen, your summer experience, your fellowship, you know, your first job. Show up every day and be really good. I like to identify myself as a problem solver. Sometimes you work with people that are problem indicators. They can indicate a problem, but you can't tell me how to solve it. I like to be a problem solver. So I can tell you what's wrong, and then I'm going to come with some suggestions about what we can do about our problem. So if it's messaging, if it's an interview, if it's engagement, I do a lot of, I senior advise on I help our political team now. So I'm doing a lot with our engagement and, you know, with groups and whatnot. So you have to, you know, people value folks that can fix things, that can be additives at work. And so I'm always an additive. So you might think I'm only here because I'm Black, but I'm actually here, you know, wherever here is, because I am very adept and good at solving problems. Last thing I'll say is when I was 16 years old, I printed business cards for myself that I would go around town with, because that's what lame 16-year-olds like myself do. And my business card said, I specialize in results. So I would hand my business card to someone and they would read it and they'd say, oh, what kind of results? And I would say, whatever results you need. And so I got people got to know me around town. It's like, oh, that's the young girl with the cards, but she said she specialized in results. And when they called on me to do things, I executed. And so for young people, I think it is really important, especially young people of color, it is really important to have, you know, data to back up what you're saying, because somebody's always going to suggest you don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, literally, this is what the data says. This is not me, but this is the Pew Center. Okay, the Pew Research Center said what I said. Have data to back up what you're saying and just be confident. And oftentimes we aren't confident at work or wherever we are because we're unsure about what it is that we're saying. But if we get sure about what we're saying, I mean, we do the research, we come prepared, we get the data, we can be more confident in our delivery of it. So I can be confident because I know I did my research. I know what I'm talking about.
All right. Thanks for the question, Mackenzie. Next up, and I apologize in advance if I mispronounce it, Isai Soto. Did I get that even close?
Close. It's a little close. It's Isai.
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 Right. Isai, tell us school year, where you're zooming in from.
Awesome. My name's Isai. I'm from San Diego, California. Just it's North County, San Diego. So when you said like North Omaha, I like totally get it, because people from San Diego will tell you something that are like, you're not really from here. So I'm in the college. I'm a rising sophomore. And so one of my questions that I was wondering about is that you recently were tapped to be in the criminal justice reform task force, which I thought was really great. And so I wanted to talk about how the recent, not so recent, but how the upheaval for Ahmaud Arbery's death has just really shifted the focus to facing these injustices that a lot of people of color face, especially Black Americans. And I wanted to ask you, like, how do you think that this like just big like upheaval will change how Democrats address these criminal justice reforms?
Yeah, thank you for the question. You know, I think about the case of Ahmaud Arbery, who now we're only talking about it, and the wheels of the criminal justice system in Georgia are turning for Ahmaud's family because we all saw the video. It's not because, you know, they had this video more than 75 days ago and did nothing. The prosecutor's office down there. So it is, I mean, it's, you know, we know their names: Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Trayvon Martin, like the list goes on and on. Sandra, but like the list goes on. We could sit here and unfortunately name 100 folks, Philando Castile. So I think that's why, I mean, I often say this, but like who our elected officials are matter. Who the president is matters, because the president has the power to appoint an attorney general. And I'm really excited on our task force. We have folks like Vanita Gupta, who currently runs the leadership conference for civil and human rights. But before that, she was at the Justice Department under Eric Holder, who former attorney general in the Obama administration, who's also on our task force. Like the Eric Holder Department of Justice is the Department of Justice that went and entered into consent decrees with places like Ferguson and Baltimore. It's the reason change is lasting change, because in my opinion, change is only lasting if it is enduring. If it's not enduring, it's not actually change. It's just a moment. But that is the reason we have real change in some of these places, because people that cared about communities, that cared about justice for all people, were there and doing the work. And so I think that over the course of the last couple of years, because of the viral footage, which is traumatic for a number of people, right? Like I had to watch the Ahmaud Arbery video because I had to explain it to some other people, like what was happening, but it hurt me to watch it. And I don't want to have to watch things like that. We shouldn't have to watch people of color, just anyone actually, but we shouldn't have to repeatedly watch Black and brown bodies being murdered on video in order as a step towards justice. It should not be that way. But I think that the fact that people are seeing these videos, that we are having these very frank conversations, that folks are speaking out. Vice President Biden spoke out on Ahmaud Arbery and has talked about it a number of times in interviews that he's done. It helps bring awareness, and it helps create change. And so the Criminal Justice Task Force between the Biden campaign and the Sanders campaign, these will come out of this will be a foundational report for the party's platform drafting committee. And so I'm excited about the conversations we're going to have. I know some people are like, how are you on criminal justice? Because I am a former member of the Federal Advisory Committee on Juvenile Justice and the Coalition for Juvenile Justice National Young and Emerging Leaders Committee. So I'm very excited about the work we're going to do. It's a lot of work. Congressman Bobby Scott, author of the Safe Justice Act, is one of the co-chairs. And I know he's going to put us to work. But hopefully, I'm very hopeful, and I know what will emerge will be a good foundational document where we can go forward and do the work and put what we all say we believe on paper.
All right, thanks so much for the question. Let's try to squeeze a few more in. We'll bring back Ashley Pollard, who we spoke with earlier. Ashley.
Hi again, Symone. I'm Ashley Pollard, a 2020 graduate of the McCourt School of Public Policy. Thank you. So you mentioned earlier that change takes strategy and that it takes time. And I'm wondering, as a radical revolutionary, if you've ever felt like you've had to compromise on your passions or your mission because of the strategy and because of time, and if so, how you dealt with that.
That's a good question. I don't think I've ever felt that I had to compromise, because in the book I talk about having a personal, like a line, personal and professional. And I think everyone should actually have a line. And the line is like, like when someone does X has gone too far, whether it's personal or professional. And when X happens, you need to know what you're going to do. So I have a personal and professional line. There's just things, people I work for, I don't care who you are, people I work with, they cannot ask me to do. My principal, my boss cannot ask me to lie. I don't care who my boss is, because I won't lie. Because as a communications professional, all I have is my word. And the moment I tell a lie, my word is no longer, what did people say? My word is no longer bond. Like it is, I'm a liar. Okay. Look at some of these people that worked at the White House for Donald Trump, stood at the podium. Okay. Missed their personal and professional line. So I don't feel like I've ever had to compromise on my values, what it is that I believe, but I have had to pick my battles. And I think in life, we have to pick our battles. In our personal relationships, we have to pick our battles. And in my work life, I have to pick my battles. Okay. I can't go into the meeting like guns blazing every day. I got to pick my battles, and I have to be strategic in our work lives. In my career, I've had to be strategic about how I bring things up. Sometimes, you may not be the best person to raise, the topic in the meeting. You might need to let Sue raise the topic, and, Sue, I find it interesting that you said that. And then you and Sue are now a tag team, and they're going to get these people together on this particular thing. And so I think if we really want to create change, if we really want to be effective, we have to be willing to be strategic. And being strategic takes a little extra thought power, a little extra brain power. And sometimes people don't want the strategy. They want to just, tear the building down, flip the table over, and say, we have now flipped the table over. What are you going to do for us? And that's not strategy. That is not how any of the effective people that have came before us got things done. I have a photo in my apartment of Fannie Lou Hamer and Ella Baker. And I posted a picture on my Insta story the other day that said, Fannie and Ella taught me. Because Fannie Lou Hamer and Ella Baker were strategic. They had issues with the system, but they were strategic about how they went about addressing those issues. Ella Baker wrote the political strategy for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Okay, she wrote the strategy. They went to Ella Baker to put the strategy together. So I think about Fannie Lou Hamer and Ella Baker when I'm trying to work through something.
Thanks, Ashley. All right, I want to try to squeeze a couple more in. So let's go to Allie Alchul. Allie?
Hi there. I'm Allie. I'm
Hi, Allie.
Here in the college, calling from Los Angeles. My question has to do with the new vote by mail measures that yourself and the writing campaign are recommending. I'm just wondering how your strategies have changed in like get out the vote efforts when you're trying to mobilize people from their homes rather than getting them to go to the polls.
I know, right? I mean, well, great question. Who knew that in this one of the most actually consequential election of our lifetime, we would have to get creative and rely on voting by mail in some places, but still push for safe in-person voting options, because we know that, you know, there is literally not a way to scale up full-scale vote by mail everywhere so that it will be 100%. And so how can we ensure that a cornerstone of our democracy, free, fair, and open elections, is still available to people in the midst of this pandemic? So it's complicated, right? Like I am not a democracy scholar by any means, but we have some very smart people who are thinking about ways that we can do this. We're talking about I'm like, what can I say here? We're talking about some policies that we might be unveiling sometime soon as it relates to what what Vice President Biden would do when he is elected. Because the reality is the coronavirus has just laid bare issues that have long been there in our community across the country, whether it's the health inequalities, whether it's the issues with how we conduct elections in this country. So we're thinking about some plans, but it's something that, frankly, Democrats and Republicans have to think about. This isn't a partisan issue. Like when we say, protecting the ballot box, protecting the vote, that's protecting the vote for everybody, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, independent, or otherwise. So.
All right. Thanks, Allie.
But I will say, some people don't want to protect the vote, Mo. Some people have been actively trying to make it harder for people that look like me, young people, Black people, to vote. So we also are going into that with that realization.
Yeah. Okay, let's try to get a question in from Rhonda Craig. Rhonda, you're up.
Mo, Symone, thank you all so much. I appreciate this. I'm Rhonda, based in LA currently, but heading back to DC at the end of the month. Just graduated from the McCourt School of Public Policy also on Saturday. I love this notion of get out of line. So prior to coming to the McCourt School, I worked in TV journalism. I consulted in racial equity. And now I'm wondering, as a mid-career professional that has never worked a campaign a day in my life, how do I go about the process of pivoting into the world of politics in 2020? What advice?
Well, Rhonda, what you do is you send some people your resume, like me, like Mo, and Mo can send it to me. And then we put your resume out there to people that are looking for talent. Look, I mean, the reality is, if we only ever hire from the pool of people that have only ever done presidential campaigns, that have only ever worked in national politics, like, we're not letting new talent in the door. Like, if that was the case, I wouldn't have a job. I would not be here. Somebody had to take a chance on me. And right now, there is a want and a need for people who are being creative and innovative. There are Senate races all across this country right now that Democrats need to win, okay? That we need good, strong talent to go to some of these battleground races. The Georgia race is in play. Have y'all seen the polling? Like, we can elect a Democrat to the Senate in Georgia. There are, Mark Kelly in Arizona. There are races in play. There's House races that we have to defend in order to keep our majority in the House, and we want to get to a majority in the Senate. There's, yes, presidential campaign that we are running. There's a coordinated campaign that will be run. Like, we are staffing up in battleground states across the country. But I think the best entry into politics for people that, maybe haven't done it before is to find someone who's in it and then literally ask them. I told you, I went on 29 interviews before I got my first actual political job. Some people would have stopped at interview 5. By interview 15, my roommate at the time was like, girlfriend, they can hire you at Deloitte. You don't have to do this. And I'm like, no, I'm good. So you got to be tenacious about it. But, I think that's why the Institute of Politics at Georgetown is really a great resource for the students, because I know the people that have been fellows in this program, okay? Any one of these people, what they sign up for is to be a member of the network, okay? The network should take your resume.
Thanks, Rhonda. So I usually end, as we're running out of time, I usually end with a brilliant question, but Rhonda just asked my brilliant question about how young people can get involved. So I think we'll just we'll end it there. Symone, thank you so much for
Thank you, Mo.
being generous with your time and coming back and visiting with us at GU Politics. And hopefully the next time it will be on campus, whenever we can get back on campus. Congratulations on the book. No You Shut Up is on sale starting tomorrow, right?
On sale starting tomorrow, but you can pre-order today anywhere where books are sold. You can go, it's on Amazon, it's everywhere. It's on Audible, it's on wherever audiobooks are sold. And you can go to my website, www.simonedsanders.com/book, and you can find it there. But I appreciate you guys. Thank you, Mo. Y'all are doing the Lord's work over there at the Institute of Politics. I really think it's amazing that you're creating space for young people, regardless of where they sit on the political spectrum, to get introduced to the world of politics from all angles. Y'all got reporters, you got operatives. It's great. So just thank you for what y'all are doing and keep it up. And to the students out there, particularly the folks that just graduated, I know these times are tough. It is let me just say it's raggedy. Y'all should not have had to experience the last months of your senior year like you did. But y'all are going to help change the world. Don't give up. Don't be dismayed. Get out there. We need you. It did not have to be like this. It will not always be like this if we do the work. So just, keep y'all's heads up. Everybody is very proud of you. I know I am.
Symone, thank you very much. Thanks everyone for tuning in tonight and for the students who participated and asked questions. And follow us on all of the social media platforms at GU Politics to find out about our next events. Thanks so much, everybody.